Here is everything the Bible tells us about the man who actually arranged the most important marriage in the Old Testament. He travels 500 miles alone, through desert, through silence, with 10 camels loaded with his master's wealth and a mission that, if he fails, will cost the future of an entire people. He prays twice, out loud, in front of strangers who do not share his faith. He negotiates. He weeps. He bows to the ground and worships God in someone else's living room. He watches a woman draw water from a well and stands absolutely still. The Hebrew word there meaning stunned, astonished, suspended, waiting to know whether the God of his master has just answered his prayer in real time. He tells the story of his mission not once, but twice, in such detail that it takes up an entire chapter, 67 verses, the longest chapter in the entire book of Genesis. And then, when the wedding is complete, when Isaac takes Rebekah into his mother's tent, when the grief of a dead matriarch is finally eased, this man vanishes. No farewell, no thank you, no name, 67 verses, the most detailed account of any single mission in Genesis. And the protagonist of every one of them remains anonymous. That is not an accident. In a text that names camels, names wells, names trees, names cities of 400 years past, this man, the one who carries the entire weight of the story on his back, never receives a name. The rabbis noticed, the medieval commentators argued, and most modern sermons do not stop here long enough to ask why. We are going to stop here, because the story of Isaac's marriage is not really about Isaac, and it is not about Abraham, and it is not fully about Rebekah, though she is extraordinary, and we will get to that. It is about an unnamed man in his 70s, entrusted with everything his master owned, walking into a foreign city with a prayer on his lips and no guarantee that God would answer. And somehow, in the economy of this text, that is enough to make him the most important person in the story. Let's go back to the beginning. The year is somewhere around 2000 BCE, though the exact date is not the point. The city of Haran, in what we now call southeastern Turkey near the Syrian border, is old. Not old the way some cities feel old. Old the way a place feels when it has been continuously inhabited for longer than anyone can remember. The streets smell like livestock and wood fire and grain dust. The water comes from a well at the edge of the city, and in the evening, when the day has cooled to something survivable, the daughters of the city come out to fill their jars. This is the world into which our unnamed servant enters. He has been given the most important assignment of his life. Abraham, his master, an old man now, old enough that the text says his days were advanced, and God had blessed him in all things, has summoned him to his tent and made him swear an oath. The oath itself is strange. Abraham asked the servant to place his hand under Abraham's thigh before swearing. The Hebrew word for thigh here, yarek, appears in only one other place in Genesis, in a nearly identical scene, which we will get to in the 5th section. But for now, understand what this gesture meant in the ancient Near East. It was a sworn oath made before life itself, before the source of lineage. Some commentators suggest it was sworn before the covenant of circumcision, the physical mark of the promise God had made with Abraham. To swear this oath was not merely to make a promise. It was to invoke everything the covenant meant, everything Abraham's life had been building toward. And the content of the oath? Find a wife for Isaac, not from the daughters of Canaan, where they lived, but from Abraham's own people, 500 miles north in Mesopotamia. Do not let my son go back there, Abraham says. If the woman will not come, you are released from this oath, but do not let my son go back. The servant asks a logical question. What if the woman is unwilling? Abraham answers with remarkable certainty. God will send his angel before you. It will succeed. And then Abraham, who has been the central figure of Genesis for 15 chapters, steps out of this story. He gives the order, he expresses the faith. And then Genesis 24 belongs entirely to someone else. The Hebrew word used for this servant is eved, which can mean servant or slave. It is a word that in some contexts erases personhood entirely. But look at the full phrase in verse 2. The servant who was the oldest in his house, who had charge of all that he had. The Hebrew there is Zachan, elder senior, the one with authority. This is not a household errand boy. This is the man who runs everything. He is trusted with 10 camels. 10 was not a small number. Camels were expensive, slow and essential for long desert crossings. 10 camels loaded with gifts from Abraham's household, jewelry, silver, gold, garments, is a traveling display of wealth deliberately chosen to communicate something to whoever received him. This mission is serious. The man who sent me is serious. What I am asking for is worth more than the gifts I am carrying. He sets out, 500 miles. Through the Negev, through the Syrian desert corridor, north along the Euphrates Valley. We are not told how long it takes. We are not told what he thinks along the way. The text moves us directly to the moment of arrival, which tells us something about where the narrative weight is being placed. The journey is not the point, the arrival is. He arrives at the city of Nahor, Abraham's brother's hometown, at the time of evening. The women are coming out to draw water, and here, before he has seen anything, before he has spoken to anyone, before a single thing has happened to suggest this will work, he prays. Out loud, sitting by a well in a foreign city, in full earshot of anyone who might be nearby. He does not pray in private, he does not pray silently, he addresses God directly using the divine name, Lord, God of my master Abraham. Please grant me success today and show steadfast love to my master Abraham. And then, before he finishes, he describes exactly what he is asking God to do. He will ask a girl to give him water. If she offers to water his camels too, she will be the one. That will be the sign. The specificity of the prayer is worth pausing on. He is not asking for a feeling. He is not asking for a dream. He is asking for a logistical confirmation that can be verified in real time, in public, within the next few minutes. That is either extraordinary faith or extraordinary nerve, perhaps both. And then something strange happens in the text. Before he finishes praying, the text says before he had finished speaking, Rebekah appears. She is carrying a jar on her shoulder. She is described as very attractive in appearance and a virgin, but the narrator does not linger on her beauty the way ancient texts often do. What the narrator lingers on is what she does. She goes down to the spring, she fills her jar, she comes back up, and the servant runs to meet her. He asks for water. She gives it immediately, without hesitation. And then, before he can say another word, she says something that stops him. I will draw water for your camels also, until they have finished drinking. Now, before we move forward, stop here. 10 camels. After a 500-mile desert crossing, a camel can drink 25 to 30 gallons of water after a long journey. Some accounts suggest even more. 10 camels, possibly 200 gallons of water, from a spring, drawn by hand, 1 jar at a time. Rebekah does not offer to draw a jar for each camel. She does not suggest a quick drink. She says, until they have finished. Until. This is not a gesture. This is labor. This is an hour or more of sustained, physical, unprompted work for a complete stranger. The text says she hurried. She emptied her jar into the trough and ran back to the well to draw more, and drew for all his camels. And the servant, this is the verse, stands in absolute silence watching her. The Hebrew word there is mishtai, the Hitpael form of a root, meaning to gaze in wondering astonishment. Robert Alter translates it, the man staring at her in silence, waiting to know whether the Lord had granted success to his journey. He knows. He is watching it happen. He asked God for a sign, and the sign is unfolding in front of him in real time, jar by jar, trip by trip, in the fading light of an evening at a well in a foreign city. When the camels have finished drinking, he takes out a gold ring, half a shekel in weight, and 2 bracelets of 10 gold shekels. He places them on her. He asks, "Whose daughter are you? Is there room in your father's house for us to spend the night?" She answers, "She is the daughter of Bethuel, the son of Nahor, Abraham's brother's son. She is, in the most precise possible sense, exactly who she needed to be." And the servant bows his head and worships, right there at the well, in front of Rebekah, in front of anyone watching, in front of the city of Nahor. He worships God out loud. "Blessed be the Lord, the God of my master Abraham, who has not forsaken his steadfast love and his faithfulness toward my master." That word, hesed, translated as steadfast love, is one of the most theologically loaded words in the Hebrew Bible. It appears hundreds of times. It describes the covenant loyalty of God. It is the word that underlies the entire relationship between God and Israel. And the first human being in all of Genesis to speak that word aloud in direct address, in spontaneous, public, unprompted worship, is not Abraham, not Isaac, not Jacob. It is this unnamed servant standing at a well in Mesopotamia with wet camels behind him and a gold ring in his hand. That word, hesed, does not come from nowhere. He goes to the house. He meets Laban, Rebekah's brother, who has seen the ring and the bracelets, and who has run, tellingly and immediately, to the well. And he is welcomed in. Food is brought to the table, and here the servant does something remarkable. "I will not eat until I have told my errand." He has been traveling for weeks, possibly months. He is at a table with food in front of him. And he refuses to eat, refuses in a culture where hospitality and the sharing of a meal was a sacred obligation, until he has said what he came to say. And then he tells the story. All of it. He begins, "I am Abraham's servant. The Lord has greatly blessed my master, and he has become great. He has given him flocks and herds, silver and gold, male servants and female servants, camels and donkeys." He describes the oath. He describes the journey. He describes the prayer at the well, word for word, exactly as we just heard it. He describes Rebekah's response. He describes his worship. 14 verses of repetition. In a narrative style, biblical Hebrew, that almost never repeats itself. The Hebrew Bible is famously compressed. It skips centuries. It summarizes entire lifetimes in sentences. When it repeats, it is not because the author forgot he already said it. It is because the repetition is the point. What is the point? The scholar, Robert Alter, writes that the retelling is not redundant. It is testimony. The servant is not just reporting what happened, he is making a case. He is, in effect, delivering the first sermon in Genesis that is not spoken by a patriarch or a prophet. He is an ordinary man, a servant, who has witnessed God's faithfulness in real time and cannot help but tell someone else. And the family's response is startling in its own right. The thing has come from the Lord. We cannot speak to you bad or good. That phrase, "we cannot speak bad or good," is a Hebrew idiom meaning there is nothing for us to say. What has already been decided by God requires no deliberation from us. Take her and go. But the servant does not take her and go. Not yet. He bows to the ground before the Lord. Again. He brings out more gifts, silver and gold jewelry, clothing for Rebekah, and costly gifts for her brother and mother. They eat, they drink, and they spend the night. In the morning, the family asks for a delay. 10 days. Give us 10 days with her before she goes. The servant's response is direct, almost blunt. Do not delay me, since the Lord has prospered my way. Send me away that I may go to my master. There is no negotiation, no softening. He has been sent to complete a task. The task is complete. Every day he stays is a day he is not yet home. And then, in one of the most quietly extraordinary moments in all of Genesis, they ask Rebekah, not Laban, not Bethuel, Rebekah herself, "Will you go with this man?" And she says, "I will go." Think about what that yes cost her. She has never seen Isaac. She has met his servant for one evening. She knows only that this man has told a story with such conviction, with such evident sincerity, with such transparent faith in the God he serves, that her family said, "There is nothing for us to say." She is leaving her mother, her nurse, who is named Deborah, and who will appear again decades later when she dies under a tree that will be called the Tree of Weeping. She is leaving everything she has ever known, for a man she has never met, in the land she has never seen, based on the testimony of a servant whose name she does not know either. And she goes. There is something here for everyone who has ever made a decision they could not fully justify, who has walked towards something true without being able to explain exactly how they knew. The caravan sets out, the servant, the camels, the young women who accompany Rebekah, the gifts, all of it moving south through the desert. 500 miles in reverse, with everything changed from the first time. When they approach the land of Canaan, Isaac is out in the field at evening meditating. The Hebrew word there, lasuach, appears only here in the entire Hebrew Bible. Commentators have argued for centuries about what it means. Walking, praying, reflecting. No one knows for certain, but he is alone. And he looks up and sees the camels coming. Rebekah sees him too. She asks the servant, "Who is that man walking in the field to meet us?" The servant answers, "It is my master, not my master's son." My master, that is not a slip. In the household structure of the ancient Near East, with Abraham old and this journey the final act of succession, Isaac is now, from the servant's perspective, the one he serves. The mission transferred authority. He has completed the work he was sent to do. She takes her veil and covers herself, and the servant tells Isaac everything that had happened. That is the last sentence in which our unnamed man appears. Genesis 24, verse 66. And the servant told Isaac all the things that he had done. And then verse 67, and Isaac brought her into his mother Sarah's tent. He took Rebekah as his wife, and he loved her. And Isaac was comforted after his mother's death. The servant is gone. The story closes around Isaac and Rebekah like a door quietly shutting. The grief of Sarah's death, the chapter before this one, the last thing we heard before the mission began, is healed. The continuity of the covenant is secured, the mission is complete, and the man who made it possible does not appear again. Most of us will never have our names in any story. We will do work that matters, work that changes the trajectory of other people's lives. And the history books will record the names of the people we served, not ours. We will pray in rooms where no one is watching. We will carry things for other people across distances that cost us more than anyone will ever know. We will be faithful, not because faithfulness is rewarded publicly, but because we serve something larger than our own recognition. This man is the patron saint of everyone who has ever served without being seen. Not because his story is tragic. It is not. There is no trace of bitterness in his words, no resentment in his actions. He bows to the ground and worships at the well. He bows again in Laban's house. He tells the story with a joy that is impossible to fake. He is not serving reluctantly, waiting for someone to notice. He is serving with the full force of his personhood, his intelligence, his negotiating skill, his faith, his emotional depth, and he finds it sufficient. The mission is the reward. There is a word for this in the theological tradition. Though no single translation quite captures it, devotion without ego. service without agenda. The kind of faithfulness that does not need an audience because it is not performed for one. But here is the question that has haunted every reader who has stopped long enough to ask it. Who is he? Genesis 15, verse 2. Abraham prays. He is childless and afraid that his promises will come to nothing, and he names someone Eliezer of Damascus, the heir of the possession of his house, the man who, if Isaac had never been born, would have inherited everything Abraham had. Many commentators, from Rashi in the 11th century to contemporary scholars, have assumed that the unnamed servant of Genesis 24 is this Eliezer. It is a reasonable assumption. There is no other senior servant mentioned. The timeline fits, the authority matches, but here is the detail that changes everything about this story. The text of Genesis 24 never once calls him Eliezer. 67 verses. The most detailed portrait of any non-patriarch in Genesis, and the author, who clearly knows this man's voice and his prayers and his emotions, chooses deliberately not to name him. The rabbis of the Talmud, in Tractate Yoma 28b, do identify this figure with Eliezer, but they do so interpretively, connecting Genesis 15 and Genesis 24. The connection is inferred. The text itself refuses it. Why would an author do this? One answer, offered by the medieval commentator Nachmanides, is that the anonymity directs attention away from the servant and toward the providence of God. In a narrative theology where the central actor is always God, having a named human hero too prominent in the story would distort the meaning. The unnamed servant does not distract from the miracle, he transmits it. Another answer, more unsettling and perhaps more honest, is that the text is making a statement about which lives the biblical narrative can hold and which ones it cannot. The covenant runs through Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. The names that carry the promise are specific. Everyone else, no matter how faithful, no matter how essential, serves the story without becoming it. But here is the deeper twist. Genesis 47, verse 29. A dying Jacob calls his son Joseph to him. He asks Joseph to place his hand under his thigh and swear an oath. The same gesture, the same Hebrew word, yarek, the same invocation of covenant before life. What does Jacob ask? Do not bury me in Egypt. Carry my bones back to the land of my fathers. 2 servants, 2 oaths. 2 men asked to carry something precious, a bride, a body, 500 miles back to the land of the promise. In both cases, the servant completes the mission. In both cases, the covenant continues. In both cases, the servant's name is not the point. There is a pattern here that the biblical narrative keeps returning to. The most important work in the story of God's people is often done by people whose names the story does not keep. The midwives in Egypt who saved the infant boys are named Shiphrah and Puah, but they appear in 2 verses and vanish. The Egyptian princess who pulls Moses from the river is not named in the Hebrew text at all. The woman who hides the 2 spies in Jericho is named Rahab, but she is a foreigner, an outsider, someone the story should have erased and does not. And here, in the oldest, most detailed narrative in Genesis, a man who prays with more transparency and more immediacy than almost anyone in the patriarchal narratives, who names the faithfulness of God out loud in a foreign city, who does the difficult relational work that Abraham delegates and Isaac apparently cannot do. This man remains ha'ived, the servant. Scholars have long noted that the deliberate anonymity of this figure points to something the author wants the reader to inhabit. Not, here is a named hero you should admire from a distance, but here is a posture, faithful, prayerful, attentive, unself-conscious in service, that you should recognize in yourself. He is not a character to observe, he is an invitation to identify. 67 verses, the longest chapter in Genesis, the most detailed mission in the entire book, and we never learn his name. In a text that remembers the names of wells, Beer Lahai Roy, Beer Sheba, and the names of trees where oaths were made, and the names of the men who witnessed a land transaction 400 years in the past, this man, who carried the future of a covenant people on his back, remains anonymous. That's everything the Bible tells us about him. One mission, one prayer answered in real time at a well in the fading light. One meal refused until the errand was told. One story repeated, word for word, because some things are too important to summarize. One act of worship in a foreign house before a foreign family in the name of a God they were about to encounter for the first time through his testimony. If you have ever done the difficult work that made someone else's blessing possible, if you have ever been the one who prayed in the room no one else saw, who carried things across distances that cost you more than the outcome required, who told the story faithfully so that someone else could live it, then you already know this man. The Bible does not give him a name, but it gives him 67 verses, and somehow, in a text this precise, this intentional, this dense with meaning, that feels like enough. That's everything the Bible tells us about him. That name he was never given. Maybe we were always meant to fill it in ourselves. If this opened something up for you, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe. We will be here.